right. Well, here we are. Bowl number 7. Can't believe we finally made it here. Who has not been an angel? We've had 6 angels volunteer so far. Anybody like to? How would you like to be an angel? Okay, he was one of the original applicants, and so he's going to be our angel number 7. You can just nickname Hal Armageddon now, or Army, or something like that.
That escalates.
Yeah, that changed in a hurry. Gene's already done it, I think. So, all right, Revelation chapter 16. Revelation 16. I'm going to give a little bit of review before you launch out into the 7th bowl there. You've got your review on the top. You don't need to spend much time here, but we started this chapter with the voice saying, "Go to the 7 angels, go out and pour out your bowls." Bowl 1 was the sores. Bowl 2 was the sea became blood. And then in bowl number 3, the rivers and fresh water springs became blood. On 4, the sun scorched the people unmercifully. And then last week we studied 5 and 6, darkness specifically targeted to the throne of the beast. And then the Euphrates was dried up. What was the main purpose or thing that came as a result of the Euphrates being dried up?
The army across.
Okay, the armies across, the armies from the east, and they crossed over for what purpose? Armageddon. Well, they did. That's God's purpose. Yeah, exactly. That's God's purpose. It was a setup for Armageddon. Their purpose was to come join the rest of the forces, and let's do in Jerusalem, or not Jerusalem, but let's do in the Israelites, Jewish people, once and for all. We're going to wipe them off the face of the earth. After all, it's their God that's doing all this to us. And so we're going to complete this thing that's been tried. Some frogs went out too. What was the deal with the frogs? Unclean spirits, all right. And what did those unclean spirits? What were they promoting? What was their assignment, or what were they doing? These frogs came out of the mouth of the 3, the Antichrist, the false prophet, and the dragon. So it's basically the satanic trinity. And out of each one, out of their mouth came these unholy or these evil spirits. And they went where to do what? They went out into the world to gather those kings and to entice them to come in. So they were led by these evil spirits, and that's kind of where we left off in verse 15, 16. Verse 16. The beast and I'm in chapter 17. I don't want to go that far yet. All right, and verse 16 said they gathered the kings together to the place called Armageddon. So they are gathered there now. And just before that we have, and it's always interesting to see if you've got a red letter edition in your Bible, when kind of not out of place, but somewhere all of a sudden some red letters appear. And those red letters appeared in the verse just prior to the one I just read. And what was the purpose? What was the warning or the challenge or whatever that Jesus gave in verse 15? Be ready. Be ready, because I come as a thief in the night. And for those, if you missed it last week, we did say how quite often we think about him coming as a thief in the night when he comes for the church. Will that be like a thief in the night?
No, not really.
Why not? Okay, but will his coming be as unexpected?
It's unexpected.
Okay, so he does come. We don't know when he's coming, and so just like we don't know when a thief's going to break in. Otherwise, we'd be ready, and it wouldn't be a surprise. We'd be sitting there, and we know that he's coming at 3. We'll be there with a shovel or something, or a gun or something, right? All right. So when he comes to the church, it will be also like the thief in the night. But here, he's talking about his coming, and he's already come at that time. So this reference of thief in the night is referring to his second coming, which we are now getting ready for, because that's what Armageddon is his second coming. Okay. Also unexpected, however, A lot more easy to gauge than his coming for the church in the air, because we have this countdown. We have these things happening. When this happens, boy, you can just start clocking up. We know exactly 3.5 years. So we may not know the exact day, not we, but they that are here may not know the exact day or the hour, and so it will still take them by surprise. Besides, they're not looking for his coming. We see all these kings gathering for Armageddon. That's their focus. It's revenge and death, and they're going to kill the Jews. They're going to track them down wherever they're hiding out, and they're going to do them in. And they're so blinded by their spiritual condition that they're no more looking for Christ to come, even though anywhere in this point, these exact people who are blinded to the truth that he's coming and that get caught off guard like a thief in the night, these exact same people could have picked up the same Bible. Any of y'all plan on grabbing your Bible during the rapture? Oh, I got to get that book.
I don't think we're gonna have.
If a house burns down, that's maybe one item. You may have a Bible that's very precious to you, more so than just the paper or whatever. Maybe a family Bible, something like that. But during the rapture, hey, Twinkling and I, we're gone. So we're going to leave all our Bibles. My office alone should take care of half the state of Oklahoma, all right? And Bibles, and I just picked up another one at a garage sale this past weekend. So I've got plenty of Bibles. They can read this and be prepared, but they won't be. So he will come as a thief in the night. Even the Jews know that he's coming back, all right? And they will be reading this, but still, it still doesn't say on such and such date, at such and such hour, I will return. So the warning there before we hear this final bowl being poured out is, I'm coming. I'm coming. So keep that in mind as we see the seventh bowl being poured out. So Mr. Seventh Angel, would you read just 17? Is enough to get us started on what's going to happen in here. We'll finish the chapter tonight, I hope. How about you? Angel number 7. A little slow, you're still doing your artwork. All right.
He's adjusting his wings.
He's adjusting his wing. All right.
Okay.
Chapter 16, verse 17.
I know that part. The seventh angel poured out his bowl into the air, and out of the temple came a loud voice from the throne saying, "It is done."
All right. Stop right there. Okay. That's basically the bowl, is what's being poured out there. But this is going to be one of those as well that talks a little bit more about what's going on. But right off the onset, we see this is Armageddon setup. This is the details going into the Battle of Armageddon. This is the final scene for the final battle. And yet, I gave you this quote from Charles Dyer that said, "The gathering of the armies in Armageddon is," and here's your first fill in the blank, "is not the climax to world history." It's not the end of the world. It's not the end of mankind. It's none of that, all right? One final bowl, this bowl that Hal is reading about, one final bowl of judgment must still be poured out on the earth before Jesus returns to claim his throne. All right, so this is not about the end of time. That's why it's really not about the end of the world. Armageddon is usually associated with that. When you think of Armageddon, oh, that's the end of the world. No, not really. We still have a whole millennium to go through when Christ is rightfully on the throne here on the earth. And then we have a new heaven and new earth with mankind in glorified bodies, reigning with Christ, and the angelic creation. So there's a lot more that we've got to go here. So remember that. Well, this feels like the finale, the big finale of the whole thing right here is that this is the end. It's just the end of this part of the chart. All right, so we do want to remember that. So this bowl is poured out where? In the air. Now, I read a couple of interesting things about this. I was going to get my illustration. I forgot to get it together. I was going to get a bowl of flowers and throw it up in the air. That would have been fun for you guys. So that's a thing I didn't, all right? But this bowl is poured out in the air. One thing I read I disagree with, but I'll go ahead and tell you, but it does remind us that this is, as it says, it's poured out in the air. Who is the prince of the power of the air? Satan is. And so there's a reference given to that, and I don't tie that to this because he at this point is no longer the prince of the power of the air. He's already been cast down here. That's what made him so mad. That's why he's trying to do what he's been trying to do for these past 3.5 years here. Nonetheless, it is still interesting that it says it specifically is poured out into the air. And then we hear this voice. And where does the voice come from?
The throne.
Okay. I've heard a bunch of different answers, but temple is what we're looking for. Maybe that's what everybody said. All right, so fill in your second blank. The voice came out of the temple. How significant is that? That voice that came from the temple we've heard before. And that temple says, John 19:30. No, it doesn't. But has anybody turned to John 19:30? What does it say, Rick, in 19:30?
When Jesus therefore had received the sour wine, he said, "It is finished."
It is finished. It is finished. And so we hear this voice that comes from the temple, and it says, does any translation say anything other than it is done? What does yours say?
It says it is done.
Okay.
But it
Right.
also says it has been and will remain done.
Done. Ooh, that sounds like the Amplified version. It has been and it will remain finished. So it is done. Any other translation? I didn't look in very many, but I looked in King James and New King James and NIV and Holman. They all say it is done. So you read John 19:30 where it says it is finished. Now I don't often get into the Greek words, but it's just that spoken word that comes from the temple is not just something to just rush past, all right? Because he said it, and it was as significant and as powerful as when Jesus spoke those words from the cross and said at that moment in time, it is finished. Now, when Jesus said on the cross, it is finished, did they turn out the lights and go home and it was all done? Nothing has happened since then. For 2,000 years, nothing's happened because it was finished. It was all done. That's not what happened. Life kind of went on and stuff. So what was finished? Salvation. God's redemptive work was finished. That was completed on the cross, right? Juman, you had a question or comment? Okay, you just bought something because you raised your hand, so you bought 2 for 50 cents. All right. That's right. All right. But I looked at that word. I just couldn't get past it. First of all, we have the voice come from the temple. We'll talk about that in a minute. But this one word statement that he says is like talio. Talio is the Greek word. It comes from that word anyways. And it's a single word that means victory. It means completion. If something has been accomplished, it is over, it's done, it's finished, it has been accomplished. And that word that Jesus spoke from the cross, and I was looking to see, and I didn't quite track this down. They just tie these two verses together, these statements together. I was trying to see if there's a difference between it is done and it is finished, because every translation I saw was that. Same idea though, it's done, it's finished. But this one word statement of completion or victory is used in Revelation 8 times more than it's used in any other book in the New Testament to describe the various events that are related to Jesus' second coming. And I give you those references, we won't read them, but back in chapter 10, chapter 11, in the last chapter 15 we'll look at, and verse 8, we'll look at those in a minute, but then in the future, next chapter, in a while, later on we'll study 17:17, and in chapter 20. Over and over we hear these statements of it is finished, it's completed. So we've got to kind of understand what this is, because it is so final, it is completed, and yet some things still go on. In the box, I went ahead and put it in the box for you. Now, to tie this statement to what Jesus said on the cross, now judgment is now complete, just as in Christ's day, his redemptive work. Fill in the blank with redemptive. His redemptive work was finished. So when Jesus said it's over on the cross, there's a lot of God's plan that he's working out. A lot of his time scale that was still going on, but it was complete at the time of the cross for redemption. But this is not redemption. This is judgment. So it's the same sense of completeness, but it's a whole lot different setting that it's being used in. So we see this place where it's coming out of the temple, and we have to think of this idea of how complete this is and how we're hearing this idea of things being completed. This is chapter 16, but in chapter 15, verse 1, the second part of that says, with them, God's wrath. With them is referring to our 7 angels. So we've had 7 angels now. And as it announced in chapter 15, the coming of these 7 angels, it says, with them, those 7 angels, the wrath is complete. God's wrath is complete. And so when we think of this completion, this is saying, here's what's coming, and when this is done, it is complete. And then in a few verses later, chapter 15, verse 8, it says, no one could enter where? The temple. All right, so we're filling in our blank. The first one in verse 1 is his wrath is complete. And in verse 8, no one could enter the temple until what? Until the plagues were complete. Those plagues, these 7 bowls had to be completed. And as soon as they were announced in that same voice that we just talked about, that came from the temple, we knew was the voice of God. And it said that no one else could enter the temple until this was complete. So what happens in pretty rapid succession, apparently, each one of these bowls being poured out, was a process that was already predicted that at the end of this process, judgment would be complete. So we look at all judgment in the tribulation, but we also look at judgment in the history of mankind. God has had to judge over and over and over. He judged in Noah's day, didn't he? And he's judged even his own people. And he's judged and judged and judged. And this shows that this judgment is over. Anybody have a problem with that, saying it's completely over? Anything coming down the other chapters of Revelation that make you want to say, is it really over? We still have the judgment.
It's over, it's over.
Well, he said it's over, it's over. I agree. I'm not saying it's not over.
But that's on the earth, right?
Sure. Yeah, this is the judgment on the earth. We still have the great white throne judgment. All right? However, think about the difference of that. All right? This is people being judged. This is people being, the earth being punished and judged in that way. And so, yes, there's that day where they stand before the Lord and show for that, but that's not the same as what this is. So when he says it's complete, this is it. This is it. And in fact, the judgment is complete. It's kind of like when we watch a trial and someone goes through the whole process, whatever process that is, with a jury trial or something like that, and when they come down with the verdict, they say, here it is, you've been found guilty. All right? And so, and then there's that sentencing stage though as well, right? And so when they come back before the judge, is it to still try the case? No. Judgment's over. You've been found guilty. We just now got to see what your sentence will be. Will it be life in prison? Will it be life without parole? What those kind of things. But you understand when the verdict is there, you're guilty, the judgment is finished. It's a done deal. We know there's appeals and all that kind of stuff. So, but, all right, so that's kind of the completion of what we see here. And that's what, when the angel begins to pour out this bowl, immediately we hear this voice, it's done. It is done. So this is the final thing that God has been waiting for to pour this out. I've given the reference many times, but again, God said, vengeance is mine, I will repay. And so this is his repaying on evil mankind and on the devil and his demons as well. Okay? Verse 18, Mr. Angel, sir, if you would.
Then there came flashes of lightning, rumblings, peals of thunder, and a severe earthquake.
Okay, verse 18 talks about this lightning, thunder. We've heard and seen that before, right? This expression in the air, this result. We know that all lightning and thunder is not God's wrath being poured out on mankind. It comes along with a storm. But this is tied directly to that. This isn't caused by weather patterns or anything like that. This is God using his nature to express that. So there's lightning, there's thunder, and then there's this earthquake. And I found that quite fascinating as I looked at that. And when it describes this earthquake, it's an earthquake like none other. In fact, it says, as long as there's been man on this planet, there's never been an earthquake like this. So you can't even say go back before recorded time or records were kept or, anything. There has never been an earthquake like what is going to take place as this seventh bowl is being poured out. Not even, yeah, there's been earthquakes in the past, and there's been earthquakes caused by God for certain reasons. Expression when Jesus died on the cross, as well as the darkness, those kind of things, to set prisoners free out of jail, those kind of things. So God can use an earthquake, but this is no ordinary earthquake. Listen to these numbers. If I had PowerPoint or something, this may be a little bit more effective. But some of the records, and this is not even in our day, but let's just go back and think about, earthquakes that have been around. So yeah, so there's earthquake now and then. Earthquakes that measure 6.5 on the Richter scale or higher, so the big ones, right, the big earthquakes. From 1990 to 1969, so let's just say 70 years. In those 70 years, 48 earthquakes were that big. 48 earthquakes. That averages, that means that's an average of 6 major earthquakes per decade. 6 per decade. So every 10 years you had 6 of these major earthquakes. That's pretty serious, all right? But get this, from 1970 to 1989, just 19 years, following those earthquakes, there were 33 earthquakes that large. That makes that an average of 17 per decade. We went from 6 per decade to 17 per decade. From January 1990 to July of 1990. Whoa. Just in that period of time, January to July of 1990, there were 10 earthquakes that were that large or greater. That is 10 major earthquakes in 6 months. In 6 months, all right? From July 1990 to October of 1992, so a year and a half, less than a year and a half or whatever that is, this blows my mind. And this is the last number I have for you, so we're just going back to 92. There were 133 major earthquakes. That is 600 per decade. If you average that out per decade, that would be equivalent to 600 per decade. That is crazy that there could be that many. Now, what's happening since then? Earthquakes decreasing or increasing? Increasing. So I wish I'd got the numbers for that. And so what is this saying? When God says, I'm going to shake and rattle things, it's warning signs. It's trying to get us prepared for what's coming. Okay? And so when it says this earthquake comes, there's never been anything like this on the earth, and it comes with this final bowl and this final judgment. We could say more about that, but that's devastating. The death of the number of people. I read another chart where it showed the number of people that were killed in those previous earthquakes. 200,000, 120,000, 40,000, just incredible numbers. And yet those were mild compared to what's going to happen here. It doesn't just say there was an earthquake, all right, like happened in Jerusalem when Christ was there, like has happened in local places. This is the entire globe shaking and rattling. And it goes on in verse 19 then to describe this a little bit. Verse 19, Mr. Angel.
The great city split into 3 parts, and the cities of the nations collapsed. God remembered Babylon the Great and gave her the cup filled with wine of the fury of his wrath.
Wine of the fury of his wrath. There's a lot that's said in that statement right there. First of all, it talks about the great city. Once again, I saw some reading and one which I didn't agree with, but I'll go ahead and share. Oftentimes when we think of the great city, what city would we normally think about? Jerusalem, all right? So we normally think about that. I gave you that reference there in chapter 11. Verse 8, it talked about the great city, and it was talking in reference to the 2 witnesses. Remember when the 2 witnesses were here? And it was talking about some things there. And at that time, it talked about back in chapter 11, it talked about the great city, and it was referring to Jerusalem. I read one commentator that said this surely is referring to Jerusalem, but really most believe that the great city is talking about Babylon. Okay, Babylon. That Babylon is split in three. Can we go to Babylon today? We can go to the location, but we can't go to the city of Babylon, right? And so Babylon will be rebuilt. All right? If this is literally the city of Babylon. There's also some that say this is talking about spiritual Babylon, which some of your commentary may refer to Rome. And so if you see something like that, there's some that believe it's talking about a spiritual Babylon and tie it to Rome. But let's just say it's Babylon. So either way, it is what Babylon represents. And if you take it literal, and I don't have a problem taking it literal, that the city will be rebuilt, and upon that city, which will be the same wickedness and the same evilness that the Babylon was before, will be split into three. Now it's interesting what happens here. This is such a direct target towards Babylon. We had the target that was when which one was it? One of the things right here, the darkness, and it was really a darkness that came upon the throne of the beast, and so it was the focus was not on the people that worshiped the beast at that point, like the Boils were and some of those things, but it was on the beast. It was on the one world government and all that, and the Antichrist. This focus on this seventh thing, even though it's generally talking about Babylon, this specifically mentions the great city and is talking about Babylon, and God's attention is drawn there. It's like He never forgot. He's not forgotten Babylon and the wickedness there. It talks about other cities that will be leveled, but not Babylon. Be split in three, but not leveled. God will remember Babylon and make her to drink of the wine of His wrath. Go back to chapter 14 and read verse 10. Who'd like that one? Someone already got that? Chapter 14, verse 10. Sheila's got it.
He too will drink of the wine of God's fury, which has been poured full strength into the cup of His wrath. He will be tormented with burning sulfur in the presence of the holy angels and of the Lamb.
Okay, and the he too in that thing is talking about those that worship the beast. Those that worship the beast, he too will drink of the wrath. And so this is already predicted, already mentioned. And then verse 8 of that same chapter. The angel foretold this as well in verse 8. 14:8, Sheila.
Okay. A second angel followed and said, Fallen is Babylon the Great, which made all the nations drink the maddening wine of her adulteries.
All right, so already the angel announced that back in chapter 14, saying Babylon's going to fall, Babylon the wicked, evil. It was caused everyone to drink of the same wrath, fury from God. Let's do a quick history lesson and why I believe this is talking about literal Babylon. History lesson would be, you're filling the blank for history lesson is a scripture reference. The book of Daniel, chapter 4, verse 29 and 30. Daniel 4, 29 and 30. Who'd like to read that? Can you find that yet? Daniel chapter 4. Okay.
29 and 30.
Okay, you got it, Rita? 29 and 30.
12 months later, as the king was walking on the roof of the royal palace of Babylon, he said, Is not this the house, this the great Babylon I have built as a royal residence by my mighty power and for the glory of my majesty?
Nebuchadnezzar walking on the roof of that, he said, Is this not the great Babylon that I have built, and I built it for my own glory? Back up to verse 27 and read 27, thinking about what he is saying on that rooftop, but listen to verse 27.
Therefore, O king, be pleased to accept my advice. Renounce your sins by doing what is right, and your wickedness by being kind to the oppressed. It may be that then your prosperity will continue.
That's Daniel encouraging Nebuchadnezzar. Wake up and realize what you're doing. You're setting yourself up for a great fall. And his response, look at what I've built. Look at what I've built. I had nothing to worry about. I have created this great city, Babylon, thinking it'll never fall. It will never fall. Did Babylon fall? It fell in the past, and it'll fall again. So when it talks about the great city, the most references I read refer to Babylon. They're just talking about Babylon falling. Okay? That's our history lesson. Verse 20.
Every island fled away, and the mountains could not be found.
Every island fell away, and the mountains could not be things. So the islands and the mountains fall. This is creation backwards. Why would we say it's creation backwards? How did God create the earth first? With all water, right? And there was no land. And then he had land come up, and land separated the waters. So we see the big oceans and stuff like that. He didn't have all land and then scoop out a big hole and say, okay, I'm going to fill that with water. That's not the way he did it. He rose the land up to separate the waters. And now we see kind of that in reverse. He's knocking down all the mountains. We think of the Grand Tetons. I've been there. I think of the Rocky Mountains. Some of y'all have been traveling recently. And in fact, we've got, who's there now? Someone's there. Wanda Smith. No, she's in New Mexico, isn't she? Never mind. I'll put her in the Grand Tetons or something. All right. So we have all these mountains that are falling, and this is all caused by this incredible earthquake. This shouldn't be news to us. Shouldn't be news to anybody. This is prophesied all the way back in Isaiah. We have Isaiah's prophecy again, and give you the reference there. Reference is Isaiah chapter 24. Let's all go there. We'll just read that together. I don't know how I got through this so fast tonight. Y'all are listening faster tonight or something, all right? Isaiah chapter 24. Now, the whole chapter, you can read the whole chapter, but look at verse 1. Isaiah chapter 24, verse 1. See, the Lord is going to lay waste the earth and devastate it, and he will ruin its face and scatter its inhabitants. Now go down to verse 18. The end of 18 says, the floodgates of heaven will be opened, and the foundation of the earth will shake. The earth is broken up in verse 19. The earth is split asunder, and the earth is thoroughly shaken. The earth in verse 20, it goes on to say, the earth reels like a drunkard. So that's like a whole shaking, can't even stand up straight kind of thing. And says the whole earth is doing that like a drunkard. It sways like a hut in the wind, all right? So heavy upon it is the guilt of its rebellion. All right, that's a powerful statement right there. So heavy upon it is the guilt of its rebellion that it falls, never to rise again. In verse 21. In that day, the Lord will punish the powers of the heaven above and the kings of the earth below. That's way back in Isaiah that's prophesied. All right, and then we've had warning in it earlier that Babylon is going to fall. This judgment's going to come. Babylon's going to fall. The earth is going to shake, and all the cities fall. So Babylon isn't completely destroyed yet. Because God says, I'll chop you in three, but I'm going to come back and make you drink the wine of my wrath, of my fury. Pretty strong words, all right? Yes?
I was just going to say that the news is breaking now that 82 people were killed in a 6.9 earthquake
No way.
in Indonesia.
Oh my goodness. Oh my
Right
goodness.
now.
Right now that's happening. While we're studying it, that's kind of scary. Indonesia, 6.9 earthquake.
82 dead so far.
All right. Indonesia is an island, isn't it? Yeah, sure not been there. So a set of islands. What's that?
An island near Bali.
Yeah, near Bali. So we need to, as we close in prayer, we'll pray for them. And that's just, again, a sign of those things that are coming, and they're coming more rapid than anything. All right. Verse 21, we in chapter 16 with verse 21, and it's not over yet. All right. What does it say, Hal?
From the sky, huge hailstones, each weighing about 100 pounds, fell on the people, and they cursed God on account of the plague of hail because the plague was so terrible.
All right, Steve Moody said it, tearing it up, tearing it up. How many of y'all have been in a big hailstorm? We're talking, okay, softball? Wow, I can't even imagine. I don't know that I've even seen a golf ball size hail, maybe close to it. But when they start talking about tennis size or baseball and then even softball size, I can't imagine. Describe it.
It was in Glorieta.
Glorieta, New Mexico.
We were at camp there, my mom
Wow.
and my sister and my brother and I, and we just got out of one of the services and we're walking to another and it started hailing.
Oh, wow.
And all of a sudden, they started doing like this, and my mom grabbed me and grabbed my
Gotcha.
sister and told my brother to run right behind us. We're all covered up, hunkered down like that. When it hit the roofs, it sounded like an explosion.
Wow. And that's softball size, all right? Where were you at?
Stillwater, Oklahoma.
Stillwater, okay. And describe it.
Tennis size.
Tennis size, those.
12 many dents in the car.
Wow, all right. Pretty scary?
No,
That wasn't scary?
I was late getting in the door. That's the
Oh.
only thing I was afraid of.
That was what you're- I'm in trouble on Mississippi, all right? Where and what?
Salina, Kansas.
Salina, oh,
And
Kansas.
it was baseball size hail.
Yeah.
But when it would come down and hit the street, it would just come down, but the ricochet. That hail
And
was
it
ricochet and take out those store windows, just, I mean, not even.
So you heard the last break-in.
Boy, it beat my truck to death, you know?
Yeah. When they show on the news the aftermath of that, I mean, just
Well, the trees, what few trees was out there?
It shredded.
It just shreds.
shreds the trees, yeah. Now, take that softball and imagine a chunk of ice 100 pounds.
So that'd be-
Block of ice, that's 20
Yeah.
20-pound block of ice.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
Five times that big.
You can't even imagine that. All
Well, I
right,
talked
so.
about those meteorites, those little small meteorites, and they hit the earth, you know, and they hunt them down, is what they do. But look how big of a hole, just one this big around, leave a hole. Can you imagine a 100-pounder coming
100
down and it's gonna leave a hole?
Yeah.
Tear you.
Softball size one, or baseball one.
Oh,
too.
yeah.
It hit you just right, couldn't it?
Well, it killed some of the.
Media just keep drinking. We better stop watching the news. Don't watch the news tonight. This is getting too scary. Get it really.
Explosion and everything was equal to 200 pounds of TNT.
Yeah, explosive, wow. So,
The air base.
now I didn't check, but as far as I can understand, this is happening worldwide, all right? Worldwide, not just in a certain spot. Let's go back to Egypt. We've always likened some of these things that are happening to Egypt. This is like the 7th plague of Egypt. And since we have the time, again, listen to how devastating that hailstorm was, even worse than Salina, Kansas kind of thing, or wherever, or Glorieta, New Mexico. And listen to that being tied to God's judgment or God's trying to get their attention. And listen to Pharaoh's response. I find it fascinating to read that. Exodus chapter 9, 8, verse 18 through 25. Let's hear that story again. And now, this is nothing compared to 100-pound hailstones, but this was significant, only concentrated on Egypt. And even it tells us at the end of this chapter who was spared. And that kind of stuff. So who wants to read that? Exodus 9, 18 through 25. Just got it. Okay, Marilyn, you got it? Okay, listen to this story. You're familiar with this, but now think of it in light of God's judgment and the wrath and what happened in Egypt.
Behold, tomorrow about this time I will cause very heavy hail to rain down, such as not been in Egypt since its founding until now. Therefore send now and gather your livestock and all that you have in the field. For the hail shall come down on every man and every beast which is found in the field and is not brought home, and they shall die. He who feared the word of the Lord among the servants of Pharaoh made his servants and his livestock flee to the houses. But he who did not regard the word of the Lord left his servants and his livestock in the field.
Okay, let's stop right there for just a minute and get the scene, and we'll finish that story. So this is what Moses is told to do, that this is going to be the next plague. This is the 7th plague, and it's going to be hail. And it's going to hit the animals. You need to get them in shelter. You got to get, and you know, get the animals in there, get the people in there, because it'll kill you. And it'll strip the trees and do all that kind of stuff as well. And some of them, the Egyptians, said, 6 plagues has been enough for me. I'm out of here. So some of them heed the warning and go under shelter. But others bow up and go, not gonna believe it. Yes.
Stoning is the penalty for
I saw that reference.
and God is doing the stoning.
I saw that reference. I thought, wow, I've never heard that before too. That that is for blasphemy. That's the appropriate thing is stoning, and that's what God. That's kind of what God is doing here. So that was a neat reference I read too. All right, so let's pick up on the story in Egypt. And so we got the warning. Some already heeding the warning, and those that didn't face the consequences. But play it out to the end of the chapter.
Then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand toward heaven, that there may be hail in all the land of Egypt, on man, on beast, and on every herb of the field, throughout the land of Egypt. And Moses stretched out his rod toward heaven, and the Lord sent thunder and hail and fire darted to the ground. And the Lord rained hail on the land of Egypt. So there was hail and fire mingled with the hail, so very heavy that there was none like it in all the land of Egypt, since it became a nation. And the hail struck throughout the whole land of Egypt, all that was in the field, both man and beast. And the hail struck every herb of the field, and broke every tree of the field.
All right. Did that finish through 25? All right. So I'll tell you the rest of the story. But anyway, so it happened just like he said. But listen to the warning. Warning, and yet they didn't heed the warning. And when it happened just like God said it was going to happen, and it was accompanied by this lightning and stuff. One reference I heard about this is when it was describing this in Revelation, that there'd be fire as well. And I thought, well, I didn't read that, but I wonder if they're just likening it to the time that he did that there as well. And so we have this judgment coming, and it happens that way. The nation of Israel, the Jews that were there, they were spared. Why were they spared? This wasn't for them. It didn't happen in where did it say, Goshen? Yeah, in the land of Goshen, where the Israelites were, God protected us. So we see here a specific target on horrible hailstones mixed with fire that got some people's attention before it came, but those that didn't heed that. And then we have the same response. If you read that out, same thing happens. Pharaoh comes and calls Moses and says, just make it stop, make it stop. You were right, we were wrong. We're sorry, just make it stop. And so what does Moses do? He walks out. He says, when I walk out of here, I'll ask God to make it stop. And he does, and it stops. And what does Pharaoh do? Whew, that's over. I changed my mind. I'm not letting you go. That was plague number 7, and so it continued. It's amazing with God's wrath and judgment, people still don't turn. And that's exactly what we're seeing here. What was the response? They cursed God. They cursed God over and over. They're cursing God. So that brings us to the end of the 7th bowl being poured out, and yet we don't quite see Armageddon. So this is the destruction of all the armies that are gathered there. The remaining events then is the bringing about the end of Satan's rule. Not only here on the earth, but his rule, his kingdom that he's got. And then what happens after this, we'll begin to see this, all right? So we have the setup for the end. Don't close your books yet or anything. We have 10 minutes, and I haven't let you do questions and answers in a long, long time. I'm not sure I have any answers in my head. Okay, we got the 7th bowl. The 7th bowl, it is done. And he's got Babylon split into 3 sections, right? Is that 3 sections? So Babylon split into 3 sections. We got lightning and big old giant hailstones coming down, all right? Should put some stick figures there and I'll post that one, all right? I did read a couple other things. One thing, let me read it this way. And then if you have any questions, I'll give you a minute to do that. It says, with all the pain, terror, and multiplied sufferings of the blinded, deluded, arrogant, rebellious survivors of the awful and final judgment of God, with hardened hearts they still blaspheme God, blaspheme His name, rather than repenting and throwing themselves on the mercy, hoping against hope, that the gates of grace are not forever closed. And yet it's just amazing that they just continue to fight God instead of throw themselves on His mercy. All right, questions? All right, Donnie?
These, this earthquakes, and hailstones, and fire from heaven, that wipe out the rest of humanity, mankind.
No, it does not. It does not. It kills a lot of people, but it does not wipe out humanity. We do have the nation of Israel is still protected. They've been protected all along. They were told they would survive. They're going to survive. Obviously, people can take shelter with this earthquake. It can still, if you're out and about, not in a city, and don't have a building fall on you, then an earthquake will shake you up, but not destroy you. When the hail hits, you still find something strong enough to protect you against that, but it's not designed to wipe out humanity. Because we still have this battle coming. Yeah.
The battle runs blood up the back to the bridles of the horses, so the blood's got to come from human beings somewhere.
Right.
So
This is before Armageddon.
This is the coming of Armageddon, but the Battle of Armageddon is actually Christ's return. This is the final judgment to prepare for the coming of the Lord. All right? So, what else?
At
Yes.
what point do the Jews stop waiting for the Messiah?
Which point do the Jews
Because they know that they've been sheltered. At that point, they realize that Messiah has come, and now I'm having to run to the city.
No. Let me make sure I understand your question. They're waiting for Messiah when they're sealed, right? Well, today the Jews are waiting for Messiah's first coming. They don't realize He's already come. So during the tribulation, they realize He has come. We missed His first coming. We'll wait for His second coming, and they're protected. But they're anticipating His return and realize that He has been here once, and that's His second coming. So your question is, you said, when do they stop waiting?
Yeah, when do they stop waiting?
They
It's
don't.
back there when we were reading and back there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm not following the question.
When do they stop waiting for them to come back because they're in hiding in Petra?
Right.
Are they still going to be in there?
They stay there, yeah, they stay in Petra. Yeah, because the Battle of Armageddon is taking place, all these kings from the east, they've all come over there to destroy Israel, and before they ever go, because that's why I have the map up here. We got Megiddo way up here, it's where they all gathered together to make their plan to march down here to Petra. And I can't remember, Petra's in Jordan, right? Well, it's right up on the Dead Sea, okay? So you got Petra right in this area, right over here, and so they're going to march down here. Remember, this is Oklahoma City to Tulsa distance, so it's not that far. But they're going to come marching down here. They never march down here. So they're not even going to get close. So they stay there the whole time. And when He comes, then He comes. Sorry, I wasn't following the question I was wondering whether they're anticipating the original anticipation of the Messiah. Okay, any other questions? Clear as mud? Are we getting lost in all this? Yes, Sharon?
Where are you going to take a group to Israel?
Yes. Oh, thank you for asking that. All right. When we talk about Megiddo, all right here, who is this? That's Michael. Michael's been to our church, all right? This is Michael and his wife. We didn't get to meet his wife. But this is Michael, a Russian Jew in Israel. How many of y'all were not here when he came? Did not get to meet. Y'all did not get to meet Michael. I wish you had. Incredible young man, came with our friend David Gabrielian from Russia. Michael came here. Guess where he lives? He lives in the Mount Carmel area. And Mount Carmel area is where Megiddo is also located. Now Megiddo, I gave you that whole extra reading, by the way. That's just, take that home and read it, all right? But that's the same area, right up here in Megiddo. In fact, his address is the Megiddo address. And so that's where Michael is. That's where we want to go. Not for Armageddon, but we want to go there because Michael's there.
I'd
And
be
we
a
want to
sell
go.
that property.
What's that? We better do it sooner. We better do it sooner, but so if you see hail coming, the trip is canceled. We are still trying to make that connection. We've got a couple dates. There's 2 trips going, one in November and one in December. Neither one of those seems like ones we want to get in on, so I'm trying to work out a different date. but time's rushing away from us, so I'm still trying to work on that. Wouldn't that be awesome to get to go there, and not for sightseeing, although we would do that, but to go there and try to win some lost souls to Christ that will be in the very area where this final battle will be taking place. It's a tough, tough place to do ministry. It's basically illegal to win people to the Lord there, by the way, even in Israel. So it's a challenge to do that, but Michael's getting it done.
If I'd say a
Is
program,
there any scriptural reference to when the 144,000
let's see that
the
right job.
1,000-year reign?
When we get into talking about the millennium, that is when the second coming comes, then we're reconnected with the Jews that are hiding out, because that's when they have to bury all the dead. They got to do it because they've got to live on this planet for 1,000 years after that. So they're the ones that get to clean up the mess.
It's all over, then they can start cleaning up.
Right. If you read chapters, don't go, well, you can. You go home and read chapter 17, 18, and 19. We've still got five chapters or something. And so see what's coming up. Okay? So basically the chapters coming up are playing out what we just described. It is this final judgment against Babylon and the Antichrist and this whole world system. It's a takedown of the religious system, the government system, this evil empire that's been built. It's all going to come crashing down. So to kind of get out of this one kind of mode, and it begins to talk about this harlot Babylon and the evilness and wickedness of it. So it'll look a little bit different as we move forward in the verses. All right. All right. And it's time. Yes.
I've heard different preachers preach on that when the end comes and the battle starts, that Russia and then will come in through that gate and get up.
Well, they'll be gathered there in the valley of Megiddo is where they'll be gathered. Yeah, and that's why the Euphrates dries up. It's way over here is the Euphrates. They come over here and they gather in Megiddo. And those of us, we're talking to Paul and Marianne Lane, we're talking to about Megiddo, the city on a hill or the mountain. It's not really a big giant place. It's not really a mountain. It's been a city that's been built up, and what you're seeing is a model, but it's been built and destroyed, built and destroyed, built and destroyed until it's pretty high. The walls at some point that says 15 feet thick, and someplace twice that thick. So who built this? Solomon set this up as a city for storage and stuff because it's in such a strategic place. That's where so many different battles have taken place. So yeah, they'll come there. I don't know. The city itself is not nearly as significant of them gathering in the valley. The size of the armies. If you look out the valley, you can imagine that amount of people gathered there. If you look at the city, no, a couple tour buses and it's full. So I don't know,
Well,
you get up there.
how many armies are coming in there anyway? You know,
Yeah.
there's going to be Chinese, Russian, and
Several armies. It's all the kings of the earth are gathered together at that time. So that's
Don't say anything
those frogs go out and get them all to come over. We have the three major ones, the 200 million man army and all this stuff coming together. But it's all of them gathered in that one place at that one time. And God says, now I got you.
you know, I've never read anything about where it says they came out of the United States.
Yeah. There's not a king of the United States that'll be at that battle. So there may be a few leftovers from here. But yeah. All right. Let's pray and be dismissed. All right. Gene, you want to dismiss us in prayer?
Our gracious, kind Heavenly Father, we thank you for this wonderful Sabbath day that you gave us. We thank you for this scripture this morning that Brother Mike brought to us tonight. We thank you for your word that's been brought to us. We thank you for all the mercies and graces you pour out on us each day. We thank you for the lost souls that joined your group of people that's since VBS and today with Brother Mike's visit. This is something that we're very thankful for. We lift up all those lost souls of the world that have not yet come to you. We just pray that you'll place a disciple in their path that will plant that seed to be harvested. This is something that our hearts are breathing for. We thank you for this day. We thank you for all the church members that come out to worship you each and every Sunday. Father, just be with each of us throughout this week. Bring us back to this house next week so we can get some more of your wonderful word and soak it into our heart. We ask in thy Son's name, Jesus Christ.